listening to Setting History Straight with Linda Watson.
Okay, good. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about, it's in my spirit to do it. I've got to talk about it. I'm going to talk about this Confederate flag. And so somebody contacted me during the week and they said, you know, they're trying to take all the flags down. Can you send me the history on the flag? Well, I had never really looked at it, but it's real easy to see it when you go out and look at it, because it tells you everywhere you look up the Confederate flag, it tells you that it's St. Andrew's cross. Okay, now, so what that means basically is that the Scottish people had their own flag, and that flag was set in place in 832. I'm going to show you all that history. But what happened basically is that the Picts and the Scotch were fighting against the English, which were the Angles. There's two tribes of English. They were the Angles and the Saxons. So they were fighting against the Angles. The Picts king had a dream that St. Andrews was going to help him. Okay, I know he was Catholic. And so he had this dream. And the next day when he got up, he saw in the clouds, he saw an X, you know, like a regular X. And so with the Scottish people, they had been celebrating St. Andrew's Day for centuries. And St. Andrew's Day was a day that they set aside for St. Andrews. Now, I went out and saw this history by this Scottish historian. And he says, you know, we really don't know why we celebrate St. Andrews. The man never came here, you know, and so we don't understand why we celebrate it. Well, we're going to talk about why they celebrate it, okay? It's real obvious. Well, when he saw that cross in the sky, he did win the battle, and he actually made that the official flag for Scotland, okay? Now, the strange thing about the Picts, they lived on the east side of Scotland, and they disappeared in the 1800s, and nobody's ever found them, know where they are, no evidence about where they went. They just disappeared off the face of the earth. They know that they took boats and left, because the Scottish people had started migrating into that area. They were coming from Scythia, which is the area above the Black Sea, because of the fall of that area. Those people, the Scythians, were being pushed out by the Sarmatians, which is a tribe that lived in that area, which become the Slavic people. They are the Slavic people today. And they pushed the people that were in Scythia into Western Europe. But some of the Scythians actually left out and went into Scotland. And the way that we know that is when they wrote their Declaration of Independence in 1320, which is called the Arbroath. And I tell you what, that is really hard to find on the internet. I had to search and search and search to find the actual document, because they want to talk about it, but they don't want to tell you what's in it. And the things that they mention that are in it are the non-controversial things. But it absolutely says in there that they came from Scythia. And so how interesting is that? Now, the reason that is so interesting to this story is that's how they knew who St. Andrew was. Now, Andrew was one of the 12 apostles. He was sent to that area. We know Hippolytus, who was a historian, wrote about how he was sent to the area of Scythia and Parthia, which would have been the tribes of Israel at that point. So that's where he was sent. And his area also went down into Greece, and he wandered into Greece, and he had been told by the king of Greece, I think his name was Aegeus. Okay, he was the governor, and he did not believe in Christianity. He was a pagan governor. He had asked Andrew to stop preaching the gospel in that area around Greece, and he refused. And so this was the result. They did crucify him on an X That's why you have the X on the flag of Scotland. Okay, now, how did this flag of Scotland make it to America is the interesting thing, is because the Scottish people came in as the Scotch-Irish people. And they came in the 17th and 18th century. They would migrate. Everybody came in through New York City. That was like the mouth. And then they went into Philadelphia, and the people in Philadelphia helped assign people as indentured servants into different parts of the country. And they basically sent most of them down into Tennessee and North Carolina. They would eventually migrate themselves down into the deep South. But also the English went and hired many of the Scotch to come live in Georgia to be a buffer for and prevent, you know, the Spanish from coming into the 13 colonies. So that's one of the first things they did, is they hired these Scottish men to live down there and keep the Spanish out. So interesting, because they knew how powerful some of these men were. You remember Tacitus wrote about the Scythians. He said they were the most fierce of all tribes, of all nations and tribes. They were the greatest and most fierce. So in other words, nobody messed with them, not even Rome. If you remember the history, they came down and attacked Parthia 13 times, but they left the Scythians alone. The Scythians lived above the Black Sea, and even Alexander the Great made an agreement with them. They had one battle. It was more like Alexander claimed to have won it, but it's more like a truce. And they just claimed to leave them alone. They didn't mess with those people. Those people were fierce warriors.
Linda.
Which
tribe do you think the Scythians were from? Which tribe of Israel?
The Scythians would have been a combination of the 10 tribes, not the tribes of children. They would be more from the children of Leah, and not so much from the tribes of Rachel. Okay, the reason I'm saying that is because Rachel's children separated themselves. They were the Anglo-Saxon, and people that moved up into the Scandinavian countries, they did that early. So that history, you know, they were already up there. They eventually came back, though, and lived in the top of Germany. And then when Rome fell the first time in 410 AD, they rushed in and went into Britain. When they went into Britain, that's amazing history. When they went into Britain, the British people just accepted them. What would you think about a group of people coming into your land and you didn't even fight them to keep them out? Because they knew that they were related to them. They knew they were the same people. That's why they allowed them in.
Interesting you asked that question, because I was thinking the exact same thing. So Scythia was a combination of tribes from the northern part of the tribes, not the southern part. But right. they weren't one particular tribe.
No, they would have been a combination of tribes. Okay. They would have covered that whole area up there above the Black Sea. And their main symbol, though, was the deer, which meant that Naphtali had to be pretty predominant there. That would have been the white Huns. So they were nobody to be messed with. I mean, that's through history that even the Romans didn't mess with them.
I want to remind you that when you looked at our family crest, you thought it was Naphtali. So just remember how fierce I am. I'm just saying.
Me too.
And my sissy too. Don't mess with me.
See, isn't this amazing? Isn't this amazing how this cross is what he got nailed to? Okay, he got nailed to like an X, not like a regular cross. It was nailed to like an X. And the people of Scythia and Parthia loved him, and they called him their first apostle. Now, believe it or not, I'm going to read you this. I'm going to read you both of these quotes from their actual history, okay? This is the 1320 Declaration of the Arbroath. Like I said before, it's really hard to find it because these guys really hide as well. And it says, Most Holy Father, he's writing to the Pope John. We know from the chronicles of the books of the ancients, we find among the famous nations of our own, the Scots, has been gracious and widespread renown. So they're just saying, we've been around for a while. They journeyed from the greater Scythia by the way of the Tyrrhenian Sea, that would be the Mediterranean Sea, around the Pillows of Hercules, that would have been Gibraltar, for a long course in Spain among the savages, but nowhere could we be subdued by any race. That's absolutely true. Nobody took them down. Okay, and then it says, however barbarous. Thence they came 1,200 years after the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea to their home in the west where they live today. That was Scotland. They considered that the West because, you know, they considered that the West because they didn't know about America, right? So isn't that interesting? It's telling you right here that they know they came from Scythia. It's written in their Declaration of Independence. How more direct is that? Now watch this next part. This is the Arbroath. You have to really search for the entire document. And so the entire document is about, in our pages, probably 2 or 3 pages long. And it is written by the people at the time of Robert Bruce and that group of people who were fighting against King Edward for their freedom, which you've seen the movie Braveheart. That's what this is based on. At that point, that's when the English came in and took the Stone of Scots from them. These people were outraged by the English. But I believe that they are descendants, many of them are descendants of the Jews, because the Milesians came out of Ireland, and these people were the people that lived in Northern Ireland. That's why they call them the Scotch Irish. Okay, Scotch Irish means that, you know, some lived in Ireland, some lived in Scotland. They lived in Northern Ireland. Now, you know the stories about Northern Ireland, how rough those people have always been. And, you know, there's many stories about Northern Ireland. But anyway, going on here now, nor would he have them confirmed in their faith by mere anything but by the first of their apostles, by calling through second or third rank the most gentle Saint Andrew, the blessed Peter's brother, and desired him to keep them under the protection of their patron forever. That means, okay, that they are telling you that they knew Andrew was their first apostle. That's how they learned about the Messiah, is from him. Do y'all see that? This is written in their history. You know, the 1320 Arbroath is like our Declaration of Independence. You know, we can actually go and read our Declaration of Independence. I don't think the Scottish read theirs. I don't think they know this information. So when they came to America, the Scottish came to America, they pushed their way into the South, and they brought their flag with them. Now, that information is lost now, but they will tell you over and over and over, every article you bring up about the Confederate flag, they say it is the St. Andrew's cross. They know it. They know it came from Scotland. Isn't that interesting? Now, going on here, there's some other evidence that's really interesting, because they claim to have brought the bones of St. Andrew's claim to have brought those bones to Scotland. Now, let me read this. St. Regulus, they call him Rule. He was a Greek monk, keeper of St. Andrew's relics. He took in a vision to hide some of the relics until further instructions. So he had this vision that he was supposed to hide the relics of St. Andrew. And a few days later, the Emperor Constantine, now this is pretty evident because Constantine is mentioned several times in this history. removed the parts of Andrew's body and sent them to Constantinople. So they took the body. At that point, they knew where Andrew's body was, and they took it to Constantinople. Now, Rule takes that body, this is according to their legend, on a ship, and he shipwrecks on an island called Kiltramont, which later became St. Andrews. And that's where the body is supposed to be buried now. Now, this is a recent history. Let me read you the recent history. Right here, in modern times, the bones of St. Andrew once returned to Scotland in 1879 by the Archbishop of Italy, where the bones had been brought from in 1453 after the fall of Constantinople, sent to Edinburgh, what was believed to be the shoulder blade of St. Andrew. Okay, so they know, okay, they sent these bones to Scotland because they thought they had the shoulder blade of Andrew. And now in Scotland, every year they celebrate St. Andrew's Day, and they honestly do not know what it means. They have no idea why, because nobody has read their Declaration of Independence to them to tell them that they're from Scythia. Now, how amazing is that? And you know, many of those people, like we said, did come from Scythia. They went into Scotland. Scotland takes its name from Scotta, which was the mother of Ganthius. Now, Ganthius came out of Egypt. He came out of Egypt with his family, and he had been reigning there as as a prince. And he went into Spain first, and then he went into Ireland. And he formed the Milesian people. Now, that history is easy to find because that's in the Four Masters. The Four Masters is the official history of Ireland. And they talk about how he came with his family, and his wife's name was Scotta. So that's where they take the name Scotland. It comes from her. And so interesting, fascinating history. So when this flag got to America, okay, they apparently just lost all connection with it being the Scottish flag. Although they're fighting real hard for it, I believe Satan really is the one trying to destroy this flag, and he's using, different people to destroy it because he understands what it means. Mm-hmm. I believe that's what's going on here because the people don't know. They have no idea. Now, I want to show you something else. When James VI came to the throne, and you remember that history that Queen Elizabeth had no children. Wow. She had no heirs. So when she died, they gave the throne to Mary, Queen of Scots' son, which was James. He was James the First of England, and he was James the Sixth of Scotland. Yeah, I think he was James the Sixth of Scotland. Okay, so he inherited, at that point, you had a Scottish king sitting on an English throne. That point, both of these countries had come together. Do y'all see that? For the first time, they had come in together under one king. I think that's part of that healing that goes on that's talked about in Ezekiel, where it says, I'll take the stick, and, Judah will take a hold of the stick, and Ephraim has the stick also, and they take a hold of the stick. I think that's just part of that healing, but it has not fully come to fruition yet because the people still have a lot of hatred. There's a lot of hatred that goes on between the South and the North because they're two different groups of people. Do y'all understand that? There's two different groups of people. They're two different nationalities of people. They're not the same people. Now, I understand people have migrated all over the United States, right? But that hub that is in the South is basically, I believe, many of those are from that tribe that we call the Milesians, which came out of Egypt, and they would have moved themselves. They lived in Northern Ireland. They moved themselves up into Scotland. That history is real easy to see. It's really easy to see. And so they're totally different people. They're more religious, much more religious. That's why Scotland, for years and years and years, didn't have any pigs in it. You know, that's just a recent thing for them to have pigs. They didn't have pigs in the country because they were extremely concentrated on their faith. And so I think it's so interesting here. Now, James VI of Scotland, what he had to do then is he created what we call the Union Jack flag. Now, the Union Jack flag has the St. Andrew's flag in it. It's the X in the background, and it has the cross in front of which is called the St. George cross. That's the same cross they used when they went into the Crusades. Now, I'll tell you my opinion on the cross, okay? All of you may be upset when I tell you, but when the 12 tribes of Israel were lined up in front of the actual tabernacle, right? They lined them up, 3 tribes in the north, 3 tribes in the west, 3 tribes in the south, 3 tribes in the east. And they lined them up in sections, and it made the form of a cross. Yeah. Now, there's no way around that. I know people have made that into a pagan symbol now. It has all kinds of other meanings. Of course, they would take something that the Father uses and twist it, right? I believe.
There's always a counterfeit. And you can see that cross is different. That cross is symmetrical.
Yes. Yes, it is. So,
but I'm sure the cross that we think of is Satan's counterfeit. He always has one in every situation.
Yes.
You know, how we think about astronomy today, astrology, of course, is his counterfeit to try to discourage people from looking at the astronomical bodies, you know, and maybe he's done the same with the cross in that same way, you know?
Yes, could be. But it's very significant. Why would he line them up like that? He could have lined them up in a circle. He didn't have to line it up in the shape of a cross. I just think that's amazing. You know, people can, I guess, believe what they want, but the Bible is very plain about that. When you go back and look at that arrangement of tribes, it tells you how they lined up and that which tribe was on the outside edge. Mm-hmm. And so it's amazing because I think that's what it signifies here. Because at one point I used that cross, I looked at those nations and I found that that's where most of them moved. In the northern hemisphere, mm-hmm. You know, that showed where they were moving.
So the temple would have been the center of it, and then the tribes were lined up. I remember reading this in the Bible, so I agree. So the temple was the center, mm-hmm. And so what does the temple represent? It's for God's presence. I just think that's just amazing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, also don't forget the way that the tribes were aligned here. There was a lead tribe, and so when you look at the 4 faces,
yes,
that's exactly right. That goes right back to Ezekiel.
Yeah. So there's the face of the man.
The man was Reuben.
Reuben, right. So Reuben is the man, and the ox was Ephraim, and the lion was Judah, and the eagle was...
Oh, that's Ireland. I'm sorry. I was sleeping.
Dan. But anyway, it was the same. That's how, the 4 faces of that beast, which is, what's it called? Our cherubim?
Yeah.
Which one has the 4 faces?
Right.
Yeah. It's very interesting. You know, that's the thing that people don't realize, that the Father had purposes for all of those things. All of those things meant something. And so they are reflected in our history. Now, this, I can't help but get past this part because the British people, British means, it means covenant man, right?
Yeah.
And so we know that because the word Brit means covenant in Hebrew. That's real simple to see. But interesting because the X, the X is representing the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the olive.
Oh my goodness.
And the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Tav, which is the tree.
Yes.
So these people knew Hebrew at this point. Remember, they were thinking about making Hebrew their official language in America. So they knew Hebrew. This man may have put this together by accident because the king just said, let's put both flags together and make one flag. And that's called the Union Jack. And it's everywhere. It's in Australia. It's in New Zealand. It's all over in the Scandinavian countries. It's no doubt that they knew what this flag meant. But to me, that means the same thing that we talk about as the word, because that's from A to Z. It's like the olive in the top. It is like the word. And that's what we were supposed to do as a people, is bring the word to everybody else. That was our banner. And so they're trying to get rid of our banner because they, like I said, they don't know anything about it. So these are the two flags, and they merged into one. Now the colors have changed. And when they got to the Confederate flag, the first Confederate flag was not even like this. The first Confederate flag didn't even have it didn't look like that. It mainly had a circle. It kind of looked like a Betsy Ross flag. But there were so many people trying to figure out on Bull's Run which flag was representing who, that they didn't know who to fight. So they changed that flag because it was too much like the flags of the 13 colonies. I should say the North, not the 13 colonies, but it was too much like their flags, so they had to change it. And that's why they put together the Confederate flag, because believe it or not, the Scottish people always been the primary people to fight in the wars, even in World War I and World War II. They are your major. You look at your generals. Many of those generals are Scottish. MacArthur, you can go through the list. Your warlike people, the ones that join the military, or many of them are Irish and Scottish. That's just a fact. That's your warlike tribes within Israel. So, it's not, and they use some of these same symbols now in the Navy and in many of the other ships that you see. They use these same symbols. So I just thought it was fascinating history. I know that nobody knows this history, but that's what it is. And everywhere, I even found they've made connections. I read MSNBC, I read Fox, ABC. They all said the Confederate flag goes back to St. Andrew's Cross. How significant is that? But they don't know what it means.
Well, this is just another way that Satan has tried to remove our identity from us, so that we've lost who we are. And if you don't know who you are, then you don't know why you need to go back to covenant. So it's another way that he's tried to remove our identity from us. And you're right, nobody in this history, for sure. Nobody knows this history at all. And you wonder why there's something deep inside of people where they want to fight to preserve this flag, and people think they're fighting because they're racist, but it has nothing to do with that, and they don't really understand why they want to preserve it so much. I just think this is fascinating history.
Yes, it is fascinating. Now, when they redesigned it during the Civil War, they redesigned it 2 times. That it looked like the St. Andrew's Cross, both the second 2 versions of it. And I don't know why they had 2 versions of the next one. I'm not sure what the reason was. See, they made the Confederate flag. The first one looked like a Betsy Ross flag, which had a circle of stars.
Yeah, I just looked it up, and it had the circle of stars, and then it had a blue, red, and blue stripe.
Yeah.
The Betsy Ross flag was like in the corner, like the way the flag is now.
Yeah, it was a totally different flag. But they put in the next 2 were like Confederate flags. Okay, so now that particular flag, the second one that was created, it was created by somebody who actually said that they thought that it represented white supremacy. Okay, so I saw that quote from him. That's the real reason, is they feel like that because of this man, he ruined it for everybody. But I just want to make one other comment about that, and that is that the Southern people are a totally different people than the people in the North. And I say that over and over again because they're much more religious and much more conservative. And I hope y'all see that. And that's not a slant on anybody else, right? It's not a slant on any other nationality in this country. I just will tell you that this is called the Bible Belt for a reason. And I think that's because of the Scottish people that came in here. And even when George Whitefield went into Scotland, he had Passover there. In his journal, he wrote about how he kept Passover and how he kept the day of Pentecost, but he kept Passover with the people in Scotland. And he said he never had a Passover like that. He said it was just incredible. The people were just coming out of the woodwork for it. And so do y'all see that they were still keeping these holy days? You know, way into the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, these guys were keeping the Passover and Pentecost. Now, he never mentioned in his journal about Sukkot, but I'm sure if he was keeping the others, he had to probably be keeping Sukkot too. But these guys kept this stuff. And, we go over and over again because I just keep saying that's why this thing that's playing out in America, you can see Ephraim playing the role of the northern states, and you can see the South playing the role of Judah. That's why I keep saying that, because it's really obvious to me that's what's going on. And nobody's catching this, but they all say it. They all say it's the St. Andrew's cross.
Yeah.
St. Andrews was made as a patron saint among the Catholic Church. So that's, and I saw this guy who taught this information about the St. Andrew's cross, and he said, we celebrate St. Andrews every year, but we don't know what it means. He never even came to Scotland, they said, so why do we celebrate him? That these guys have made the connection. They realize they're celebrating St. Andrews, but they don't know why. They think it's just a Catholic celebration.
It just amazes me, though, that people, they don't have inquisitive minds. I mean, they don't you want to know why? I asked a Catholic not long ago, why do you eat fish on Fridays? They had no idea.
Nope.
And it's like, why would you do something like that but not understand why you're doing it or where it comes from?
And look, let's be honest, we were all like that until the Father put it into our minds to seek his heart.
But I mean, you can see it today, like this virus. People do whatever the media tells them. Oh, okay, even if it makes no sense.
So that's all I had to cover. But I love the part about the Confederate flag. I just thought that was amazing stuff. When I looked at that, I said, oh my goodness.
So with all that, we're going to say blessings to all and good night.
For more information about this broadcast, please visit our website at www.12tribehistory.com. That is the number 12, tribehistory.com, or email us at lwatson44@cox.net with any questions or comments.
You're listening to Setting History Straight with Linda Watson.
Okay, good. Okay.